Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm going to be doing things just a little bit different this week, trying to release the videos on a little bit of a different date, seeing if that helps get my views back up and keep them steady again like they used to be. YouTube's made some changes that are really killing the small channels as of late, but I was also out of town last week out at Iola looking for some parts for this guy here. Came up kind of empty, but we'll go over my haul a little bit later. So the goal this week is going to be to try to get this FTI level 4 TH400 installed in the car. But before I can do that, I've got to go ahead and try to get the speedometer gear situation taken care of. So these things come from the factory just with the speedometer housing area blocked off with like a freeze plug. They don't have any gears in them. And it's always important to pull the tail housing apart and look and see what kind of shaft you got before you go and waste money on parts. So this one we can see the hole drilled right there. So that'll take the plastic gears with the little metal retainer on them. Whereas the original TH400 that I've got sitting over here, which is now kind of nice that I don't really have to take anything apart to look inside of it, but inside of here it's got the press-on style gear. And they're a bit of a pain to get off of there and even harder to get back on there, so wouldn't really work for what I need anyway. You kind of have to match them up to the shafts that you have, but that one is a 15 tooth. And then we've got the housing and gear underneath there that we're going to be taking out and swapping into the other transmission. And now those housings, we'll see here in a second when I pull that one out, they made two different versions. One holds like the 30 tooth gears, and then have another version that holds the 40 tooth. And I need a 40 tooth exactly with the 15 tooth drive to match up with my tire size here. And the one that's in there right now I believe is a 41, so that's why we're slightly off. But gonna go ahead and try to get that out of there. I'll show you what that looks like on the housing so you can see the different numbers. Usually it's just stamped right there on the front. And then we'll swap out the gear on that, which I believe I got from Summit. We'll check that that's correct and everything else. Then we'll start trying to get that into the new transmission. Pulled the speedometer housing here out of the old transmission, went through and cleaned up on it a little bit since it was pretty dang dirty. But now we can see that it's got numbers here on the front. This one has 40, 41, 42, and 43. And that corresponds to the driven gears back here that this housing will accept. Now there is another housing that will accept, I think it's from 35 to 39, somewhere in that vicinity as well. TCI makes a great calculator where you can put in your tire size, rear gear, that sort of thing. You can tell what kind of drive gear you have. This one here is a 15 tooth, which is pretty much the most common I find in the 400s. And it'll tell you what kind of driven gear you need, or if you just need to swap out to a different drive gear to get your ratios a little bit better. But they do also make these housings. They're pretty dang expensive. I think the cheapest set that I found that had the housing, the drive gear, or the driven gear and the drive gear here was something like 120 bucks off of eBay. Sometimes you can find just the housing assembly and maybe a couple of combinations of the driven gears there to play around with, and those are like 90 bucks. So pretty happy that we were able to just reuse this one. It does have some O-rings in here. I already changed the one on the outside as you saw me do before. But right there in the center is another one that seals the shaft of the driven gear. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that out of there, get that replaced. Then I've got to install the drive gear here into the transmission. And as you can see, this one's got the little clip in there, so it's not a press-on like our old transmission had. And that's because you can tell, if you come back here and look on the shaft, as we saw earlier, this one's got the hole drilled into it. That means it's set up for the little plastic gears like this. So should be pretty easy to install. I'm going to go ahead and get that slipped on there. Try to knock out that freeze plug so we can actually get our housing installed in there with the correct gear, and then we should be all set to go there. But probably going to wait on that, and then we'll come back and install our B&M ratchet shifter here next. I think it'll just be a little bit safer drilling through the floor, getting everything lined up and stuff like that, getting the cable kind of routed underneath before the transmission's in the way, making it really hard to get access to stuff. So I think we'll be better served starting here and then getting that big guy installed up underneath. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to knock some of that out right quick, and we'll just carry on. Installing the drive gear here is pretty simple. You can see how there is that little flat slot there at the top. That's where this little clip is gonna spend its life. And as we look at this, you can see there's a hole drilled in it, and that hole has one side where it sticks through the bottom. and that is used to go inside the hole drilled on our shaft right up here, which the camera's probably not going to pick up. So this little thing will sit right down in that hole there. Then at the front you can see there's that little tang sticking up, and that will keep our gear here in place from being able to fall forward. And then the sides obviously is what keeps it from rotating and locks it into place. So probably going to be a two-hand job getting this in there, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that off camera and show you the finished result. So as you can see, I've got the drive gear installed there in the back. You can see our little clip here is sticking out the front with that tang popped up. That's what's keeping the gear here from falling out. So to take it out, you just push that tang down, slide everything back over the top of the clip, and then it all just kind of falls right back out. But it does have a bit of slop to them. They will move around quite a bit, a little bit from side to side and front to back. But just go in there, grab that little clip, move it around, just make sure that it's seated in the hole that's drilled in the shaft. And as long as it's in there, the assembly shouldn't go anywhere. Feels like it's good to go. So next up, just need to come through here, get the freeze plug to knock out here so I can get my housing in there. Then I should be done. Go ahead and put my tail housing back on here, and this thing will be all set to go into the car. So I got the old freeze plug knocked out of there. Really not too bad at all. Just went and found a long extension here like this, stuck it in the back and used it as a punch. Just rested it on the freeze plug there, hit it with a soft blow, put that dent in there, which then allowed me to get a bit more leverage, kind of have a base to go off of to hit it a little bit harder there with the punch, and eventually just popped right out. Now you could drill a hole through the center of this and use like a slide hammer, try to pull it out that way. That ends up getting a bunch of debris down in there if you're not careful, so that's why I just like getting to them from the backside since you're already here anyway, usually with the tail shaft off, checking your gear there. So not bad at all. If we look at the bore here, you can see some of that sealant and stuff left over in there. I'm gonna go ahead and get all that cleaned up. Get my old housing, we'll slap that in there, get the little retainer bolted on, then we'll slap the tail housing back on here and we should be good to go. Just about got everything wrapped up. Got the housing in there, got it clocked correctly for the little bracket here, but unfortunately my bolt doesn't want to fit. Not sure if it's just the wrong size or if the threads aren't even tapped on the hole in the case there, so need to do a bit of digging on that. You can see here that all of our gears are lining up and meshing really nice. So we got our 40-tooth driven gear here on the bottom. It's got a little bit of side-to-side slop, but that's totally fine. It just kind of butts up against the case there on the right-hand side. And we've of course got our drive gear here on top. It has a little bit of slop of its own, but just double check that it's not going to go anywhere before you button all this stuff up. But everything looks good back there. Gonna go ahead and get the tail shaft housing on here just to make sure that if I do have to do any tapping, stuff like that, no debris or anything like that makes its way into the transmission. So the small little hole on there did end up being tapped, and as I figured, it was metric. It's 6x1 millimeter, so ran to the hardware store, picked up a bolt for that, got everything assembled. You can see it all down there. Got the tail housing put back on as well, so the transmission should be ready to go back into the car, but we're going to completely ignore on that for now. Instead, we're going to come over here, work on getting the shifter installed. So I think it's going to be easier drilling all the holes to get this thing mounted when I don't have to worry about smacking into the transmission. It should just be 4 holes there. They're a little bit over a 1/4 inch in size, so I picked up some 1/4x20 nut certs, and that's what we're going to use to try to mount this thing with. I think it'll be easier than fighting with trying to get nuts on bolts underneath the car, that sort of thing. So let's head inside the car, start mocking this up, figure out where we want it on the floor, and start getting this thing mounted. There hasn't been much to show here, and it's kind of hard to get good light in here with the camera as well, but basically all I did was took the shifter assembly here, kind of mocked up the position where I liked it. I also used the base on there as well to make sure that it wouldn't get into the seat. And I was pretty happy with the approximate situation. Came through, kind of slit in the carpet, set the base back down, came through with my center punch here and a marker and marked out all of the bolt holes. Then I drilled those holes out, put a 1/4 nut cert in those using the world's absolute crappiest nut cert tool that I got from Menards. I got 1/4 grade 8 flange head bolts in there, so we shouldn't be shearing anything off. Got 2 in it in the front already. There's another one right here. Not sure if I'll be able to get anything in there because there's a dip here at the back of the transmission tunnel. But over on this side, it's above a flat surface. It's just a little bit lower than the level of the shift assembly itself. So thinking with just a little spacer underneath there, should have no problems running the 3 bolts in there. After that, I'll come through and I'll mock something up basically like this. This is where our cable will connect to, and this here is the cable retainer at the front. And essentially just follow this through, mark a spot here on the floor straight ahead of this where it's nice and straight, and then we'll get the hole made up in the floor, see if I can find a grommet, stuff like that. Then we'll get the cable assembly in here as well, get that connected up, and probably pull this whole assembly out one last time, start hooking up all the switches for the neutral safety and the reverse lights, get a bundle of wires in here, kind of run all of that underneath the carpet up and over towards the steering column. And I'll probably include an additional set of wiring as well for the transmission brake. I was looking for the little button assembly that goes here on the little lever itself, and it's like 150 bucks just for the little momentary button right there for that side. So maybe I'll just 3D print something, come up with something a bit cheaper than that. It's almost the entire price I paid for the whole shifter assembly there. So a bit outrageous that just for the little thumb momentary button that it costs that much, but I don't know, maybe I'll end up biting the bullet since it's supposed to be out of aluminum, so maybe, just maybe, we'll go that route. But I'm just gonna go ahead and finish knocking some of this stuff out, and probably get you back in here once I got most of this stuff completed. Got the shifter out of the car, and that's the perfect opportunity to come through here and install the switches. Now these come loose inside all the hardware, just got that dumped inside this little bag here. It does have 2 little screws that are used for mounting, and they have lock washers and little baby nuts that come with it. And pretty easy to see how this all works. There's just 2 little tracks here that the levers of the switches ride in. You can tell that the top one's going to be for the reverse lights because it's pretty much open except for one little tab right there. That's probably going to be reverse. If we look at the one below it, you can see that it's closed when we're in park position, which it is currently all the way forward here. And then it's going to open up when we get into reverse, which is right below reverse above it where it's active. And then it's going to close again in neutral, and then it'll be open through all the remainder of your gears there. So pretty easy to see how it works. Looks like it does come with the little crimp connectors there, stuff like that. So probably see if I can find some wiring, get some ends crimped on that to make it extra long, shove it underneath the carpet, get it up towards the steering column, then we'll worry about hooking it all up a little bit later. But I also want to run an additional set of wires up here for the momentary switch, which I mentioned previously. Not sure when I'll get around to actually hooking that up for the trans brake, but we'll just have the wiring underneath here. It's probably going to end up going to a different location because I want an interlock switch probably on the dash, something like that, where I can disable the trans brake from it being activated unless I've got the other switch flipped up. So at least if I have the wiring in here, I won't have to come back through, take all this apart once more. But don't think I need to make any other changes in here. There's like little pins back here you can take out that lets you have a 4-speed instead of the 3-speed. We don't need to do any of that stuff, so I think everything should be pretty much already set. So I'm just going to get all this stuff mounted up, see if I can find some wiring, and we'll get this bolted in the car, hopefully permanently. So I got the shifter here bolted in place, just get everything mocked up. Still need to cut the hole for the cable itself, but just wanted to make sure that everything was nice and sturdy in here. Feels pretty good. There's a little bit of side-to-side wiggle if I really kind of pull on it. And I think that's because I ended up just using the 1/4-inch washers that comes with this, that they say you can use as spacers. I tried to level it off a little bit, put 2 of them over here in the front, and that got the lever a bit more squared off. Before it was kind of angled towards me ever so slightly, but it felt a lot more secure when I did it that way. So maybe I just needed some bigger washers down there. Here in the back, I've kind of got a bunch of washers stacked together, taped together as well to make a spacer, and got that nice and secure as well. So overall, it's pretty good in here, especially when you're rolling through gears. I got the sticker on here already for the correct shift pattern because we are reversed now. I've got the little indicator on there just to make sure that everything seems to be working correctly, nothing's binding up or anything like that. So just to walk you through the operation here, we're in park currently, and because we have a TH400, it's actually 2 clicks back to get to reverse. So if you go 1 click back, it puts you in between park and reverse, and that's because this thing is universal. There's actually a transmission out there where this would be park, 1 click above reverse, but on the 400s, this is kind of nothing. This will actually disengage the parking prol, and the transmission will let the vehicle roll like this, so you always got to be sure to do the 2 clicks. So if you're in reverse and you want to get to park, you can't just go 1, you got to go 2 up to make sure that you're actually in park. But once you're in reverse, 1 down to neutral, and the safety lockout won't actually drop until you get down into gear. So once we hit first, the lockout lever there drops. That'll prevent us from going any higher than neutral, so we can't accidentally get it up into reverse. When we're out at the track, we'll just start there in first gear, and then as we're going, just pull back, and that's it. Second, third, and just that simple. And when we want to park, we can get to neutral, push the release, that lets us go up into reverse, and from there we can get it into park. It's a pretty slick operation, a very simple setup. Make sure you never miss a gear. And the one thing I like with the bench seat here is that the lever just always stays in this position. It doesn't end up getting very far back where it's like leaning into the seat, or very far forward here we're having to get up kind of underneath the dash there and risking hitting the dash in some cases, that sort of thing. So that's the great part about these ratchet shifters. I think it's going to work out just perfect for what we need. So as I mentioned, I spent most of last week out at the Iola car show and swap meet looking for parts for the Chevelle and a couple of other little things, but kind of struck out across the board. Just trying to find some more Impala trim. Found some of it, but not all of it. Pretty much all I found for the Chevelle here was this set of bumpers. They're in pretty nice shape. A little bit dirty, but they had been re-chromed. There's a sticker on the back that mentions the company that did it. It's a little bit too faded to read, but pretty nice set of bumpers here. Probably just use the front. The one on the car right now in the back has the SS emblem in it and everything else. It's pretty rusty and crusty looking, but it's at least straight. The one for the front bumper, on the other hand, is very mangled on the car. That's why I was looking for a replacement, and this one looks like it'll do the part. It's not too nice, but it's not extremely bad, so it'll kind of just blend in there. Other than that, basically just picked up some odds and ends that I would need. Got like the transmission inspection cover there. I picked up like a baffle for the valve cover, things like that. I picked up a couple of carburetors and distributor cores for Model A's. Just nothing really that interesting out there this year, so kind of a waste overall, but at least we got a couple of things, a couple of the small little things that I don't have to wait on. So that's pretty much it. Let's get back inside and finish buttoning up that transmission. So in preparation of getting the transmission mounted, I'm out here trying to clean up this cross member, and as you can see, it's pretty bad. Just using the drill there with the wire wheel on it, trying to get as much of that crud off there as I can, and it is on there thick. And that's even after I tried to get most of it with just the old wire brush over there when it was still mounted up in the car when I did the transmission mount. So pretty dirty. Try to get this a little bit better than what it is. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that this is one of the early Chevelle mounts for the 70s, where it has the Monte Carlo style where it goes in the rubber bushings on the ends and then it mounts to the frame. It doesn't bolt down directly to the frame. Apparently that was only made up until like November of '69, and then they stopped doing that and just mounted them directly to the frame. So one of those useless little things of information there. I thought that was kind of odd when I saw it myself. I had to go and look it up. But I did try to find one that would mount directly to the frame to see if I could get that transmission to sit kind of just a touch lower in the back, get our nose up for the fan, but couldn't find anything out at Iola. As I said before, pretty much just struck out almost entirely looking for Chevelle stuff. Back underneath the car here, I've got the new transmission down in the pit, loaded up on the lift here, getting things ready to install. Waiting to get my torque converter back. Brought it into a local company to have them check that out, make sure there was no damage from when the other transmission exploded. Over here on this side, nothing really to do. I'll go ahead and put the new dipstick O-ring in. I already checked the depth on my OEM to make sure that it's correct for reading the correct levels based on the instructions FTI provides. Don't have to worry about vacuum modulator since we have the trans brake over here, which probably not even going to hook that up for quite a while at the moment. We'll wait a bit, get a couple of runs under our belt, make sure everything else is good before we go adding new things to explode things to the list. Governor we'll never really have to worry about ever again. Hallelujah for that. So pretty simple on this side. Over here as well, don't have to worry about the kickdown switch anymore. We'll have to connect up the linkage, cable bracket, stuff like that, but can do all of that after the fact. It'll be a lot easier once it's actually up there and mounted. You can see back here my speedometer housing, the little bracket there, hold everything down. A little tiny metric bolt as well. So pretty much everything should be all set. Just waiting on the torque converter. So as soon as that comes in, we'll start getting this thing bolted back up. So I've gone ahead and got the transmission installed in the car here. You can see the nice clean cross member in place. Do need to try to find some new hardware. Unfortunately, the bolts I have that go into the tail housing there don't seem to fit anymore, so not sure if those are metric as well. But this lift assembly here made this job so easy. Being able to tilt it both forward and back to get it to level with the engine, and then side to side made a tremendous difference as well. Because I had to tilt it quite a bit to its side to be able to get it over the exhaust collectors, and there's these big ears here way up there that stick out on the transmission bell housing. Makes it really tough to squeeze it in between the collectors, but being able to angle everything made it an absolute breeze. So got it all in here, looks great. I did measure up on the torque converter when I installed it, make sure that it went far enough, made sure that our depths, everything else is looking great there. So just need to bolt that up, but things are going together really nicely. So next on the agenda is to come through and try to get the shifter hooked up. And to begin with, I need to put the shift linkage on it, which is this guy here. I think I need to use hole number F there, or letter F rather than number. I'm going to try to get that in there. Looks like some of this stuff is going to be a little bit tight. After that, I need to come through, get the cable bracket installed that just bolts to the bottom of the pan here. Since I've got this thick aluminum pan, don't need to use any of the spacers. So we'll get that on there and start routing the cable. Make sure that's away from the exhaust, stuff like that. Might even need to make a little bit of a heat shield for it, just to protect it since it gets pretty close to the collector assembly over here. But we'll try to get all of that done, and that might end up being it for this week. I'm still waiting for the drive shaft to come in, so won't be able to get the car on the road this week. Also waiting on a couple of other little odds and ends from pipes to come in for some of the replacement pipes, but we can at least run without that for now. And I do have a new drive shaft loop on order, which is one of the ones that bolts in. Hopefully that'll fit in here just a little bit better, get it away from the exhaust. So we're going to try that as well. So probably be next week before we actually get her out on the road again, but let's just go ahead and finish up what we can. I've got the cable bracket installed, got the cable connected as well with the shift linkage on there in the front. Tried adjusting on it a couple times. I think I'm at a pretty happy spot right here. Cable pretty much just comes out this way, runs behind the transmission mount over here, which I'm not sure if we'll be able to see very well. There we go. And then it just runs along the other side of the transmission and up and over. Gives it a nice bend to it, doesn't put any kind of kinks or anything like that in there. So I'm gonna go up top here, shift this down into the high gear once more, check it again, and if everything looks good there, we should be done with the adjustments. So things are looking pretty good underneath here. You can better see how that cable is routed now. Comes from up there on top the floor, over the transmission, routes just down here behind the transmission mount, and over to the bracket. Keeps it away from all the exhaust, so should be free from harm, hopefully where it's at. But gonna go ahead, just start buttoning up the remaining items underneath here, get the torque converter bolted up to the flex plate. I already went through and removed all the big chunks of metal from the old bell housing that had broken and fallen behind the flex plate. So that should be all good to go now. Try to get the transmission cooler lines here hooked up. And really that should be just about it down here. So gonna knock all those out quick and hopefully get out of the pit. Got the torque converter bolted to the flex plate there. Was just test fitting on the inspection cover. Seems to fit pretty good, doesn't get in the way of anything, so just need to get some hardware to actually bolt it in place. Got a bunch of other stuff on the way here that we're just waiting for. New speedometer cable there. That one looks like it got into the exhaust at some point in time. The sleeve melted off of it, so definitely not the greatest. The exhaust here, got the pieces on order from pipes to replace some of the really dented ones. We'll have to go back there and kind of realign the mufflers, get those tucked back up towards the body again, but we'll wait until we have the drive shaft and the loop in place to figure out how all of that's going to line up. So not much left to do underneath here. I think I'm just going to button up these lines right quick, get those connected, then we'll make our way back up top here and finish testing out the alignment here of our cable, and that should probably do it for this week. Got the transmission cooler lines mounted up there. Not sure if the camera's gonna be able to pick them up or not, but should be pretty much all wrapped up underneath here. There's some wiring I need to move out of the way and stuff like that, but I'll probably try to address that once I get the inspection cover mounted up and get some of the other changes I need to make under here taken care of, and we'll make sure everything's out of the way of the exhaust. But that's going to do it here for underneath. Let's head back up top and test out our shift linkage, make sure that that cable is all set up properly, and we should be done. So I've adjusted on the cable a couple of times here. I think I've got it set pretty good for what the instructions call for. Everything should be all hooked up, so everything seems to work correctly. There's our park. Lockout drops down, engages correctly. Everything should be good to go. So I think that's going to do it here this week. Basically just stuck waiting on parts. So just want to once again thank you all for watching, and I will catch you next week, and hopefully we'll be back on the road.